7-second celebrations. Let's go. Patron, let's get it.
NBA as we continue, but right now to football. The D in Big D stands for New Day in Dallas. The Cowboys introducing Brian Schottenheimer as their new head coach, brings 25 years of experience as an assistant to his first-time head coaching opportunity. It's a 4-year deal, puts him in Dallas through the same period that Dak Prescott is signed through. Here was Jerry Jones with more on the hire.
Now, I get my proverbial ass kicked over needing people in my comfort zone. Without this thing being about me in any way, if you don't think I can't operate out of my comfort zone, you're so wrong. It's unbelievable. This is as big a risk as you could take. As big a risk as you could take. No head coaching experience. Yes, to some, and it might be couched as a less than glamorous hire. What I would say to you is I got here taking shots and not shoddy shots. I got here taking shots.
I think we all need to take shots right now.
Patron.
That was just a very, very strange collection of things to say, right? You said you watched the entire thing on your phone, which you never do.
Never do. I mean, and I could not have been more captivated, just because the things that they were saying, like that. If you're shoddy sitting there, I mean, just feel how uncomfortable that moment is. I mean, you're literally talking about him, and he is 6 inches from you, going, "Hey, I'm taking shots. Biggest risk I've ever taken." Like,
not a glamorous
hire. And then you got your son on the other side, and he's air quoting a drought of biblical proportions, y'all. Like, we found the promised land in 40. It's been 30, but it's a quote drought for Stephen. Like, there's a reason I watched it for 8 minutes. It was insanity and painful, and a number of different reasons why I could not turn away.
Let's play that one, too, for anyone who hasn't seen it.
Please.
So here's Stephen Jones on the other side of Brian Schottenheimer, talking about how long it's been since the Cowboys have won a big game.
You always have to evaluate, where it didn't go right last year. And obviously, we're also evaluating where it didn't go right, in terms of, this drought that people say we're in terms of a championship game or a Super Bowl.
So one thing, like the word drought was in the question that it was asked.
Okay.
So that's, I think, part of, if there's any sort of halfway to defend it, the question was asked about a drought. And so
that's fine.
I just want to put that there, and then we'll go to what it,
people aren't saying it.
Yeah.
So you can't, this is the thing that sometimes really, look, I get it. You're defending your own record, and you can't sit up there and say, look, we've gotten everything wrong for 30 years. And they haven't gotten everything wrong for 30 years. But the reality is, it is a drought. People aren't saying it. The second, they have the longest time since being in the NFC Championship game. They made it there after the 1995 season. The next most recent team, or the next longest drought in the NFC, is the Bears, who went after the 2010 season. So there's by a margin of 15 years, they've gone the longest time. There are only 16 teams in the conference. So this, you're sort of, what you're saying there is you're putting that on other people.
Exactly.
Oh, well, people will say this or that about us. No, what we're saying is true.
Right.
Your team has not been in the NFL's Final Four in 3 decades. That would suggest, you might think, that would suggest that the people running it would say, let's analyze what part of this we've gotten wrong. They've gotten plenty of it right.
Exactly.
They've had really good teams. They've had good years. They got screwed on a bad call that one year at Lambeau Field. The Dez Cat should have been. And obviously they won 12 games in a row, 3 years, whatever, 3 years in a row. They haven't gotten everything wrong. But you would think they would try and find something that they might do a little differently, when instead what it feels like they're doing is tripling down on a philosophy that has gotten us here.
It's kind of worse than that, in that it's not even tripling down on what they've done so far. It's like getting a budget version of what they've done before. And I'm trying to say this in a way that's not like disrespectful to Brian Schottenheimer, because he may be a great coach, but they had a coach there that was running this staff. And rather than bringing that coach back, they looked around the building and was like, who can do what he did?
Right.
we'll hire you. And again, Brian Schottenheimer might turn out to be a great coach, but he wasn't a coveted coordinator. He's not a guy who's gone on a bunch of interviews. It's hard to be confident about the direction that this organization is going if not only are they not doing something different, they're doing the same thing that they've done before, but a bit of a watered down version of it.
I think that's the thing that bothers people, right? And the thing we talk about on these shows, the thing that really bothers the Dallas Cowboys fans is you're the Dallas Cowboys. Like, act like it. Right, like go get a star coach. Right. Don't be afraid to go out and spend in free agency, all that kind of stuff. Now, the people that run the Cowboys don't believe in free agency as a solution to your roster problems. They think this draft and develop, but there's a happy medium somewhere between that and do literally nothing at all to fill the holes that haven't been filled by your draft and develop. And then the coach thing, Jerry famously said, I could get 500 people to coach this team. And he's living it. And I think if you're a fan, you're seeing this hire going, that's just him doubling down on that idea of saying the head coach isn't important. And again, disclaimer again, Brian Schottenheimer, I don't know if he's going to be a good head coach. Maybe he is. But the fact of the matter is, it's not the hire that the fan base would have said, oh, yeah, Cowboys, we're back.
Right. It's kind of like he's always negotiating, even with Dak and CeeDee Lamb, right? It's like it comes to the end, and he does it in a way that doesn't bring everybody together. It doesn't unify. It's like, I'm going to do it this way, and this is what I'm going to do, and everybody's going to kind of live with it. But at the end of the day, the only thing constant has been the Jones, and everything else has been a rotating coaches, doing everything, quote, differently. But they haven't armed the staff with enough to win. And so I would say, from a coaching perspective, I think Schottenheimer is a great football coach, and I wish him the absolute best, like I do all these other guys. I hope they're all successful. But you have to be aligned with the owner and with the GM. And the problem is the owner and GM are the same person. So everybody looks to him, and he has to figure out how to get my run game to help Dak. How do we get another 2 receiver? How do we get defensive tackles? How do we get linebackers? Because all of those things equate to wins. It's not just about one thing.
I want to make a very specific point also. Okay, none of this has anything to do with Brian Schottenheimer.
Right.
What this has to do with, as we said earlier, you've got a philosophy. You have this level of drought. If you analyze it, you might say to yourself, the last time the Cowboys won the Super Bowl, free agency in the NFL was in its infancy. It had just begun. He has decided, Jerry Jones has decided, or decided back then, that's not going to be the way we build our football team. That's fine. At some point, you might look at this number. Can we put full screen number A15A up there, please? And say, maybe this is part of the reason this hasn't worked.
Wow.
Over the last 8 seasons, the Cowboys' average free agent spending ranking has been 27th in a league of 32 teams. The last time they ranked higher than 20th was 2016, and that year they were 19th. They don't believe in this. Well, someone might say, if one person wasn't making every decision, he might listen to someone who says, this is something you might want to consider doing differently because it obviously isn't working.
His pushback on that stat would be, well, we're ranked a lot higher than that in wins over that same period of time, right? Which is true. They have built good teams much more often than they haven't. The problem is it hasn't translated into playoff success. It hasn't gotten them back to the Super Bowl. I believe that if you went to Jerry and Stephen Jones and said, this one very expensive free agent signing guarantees that you will be in next year's Super Bowl, they would make that
doesn't
signing.
exist,
of
and
course.
we all know that doesn't exist.
But my point is, like, that's the pushback you get when you talk to people in that organization about their philosophy on free agency. Again, and when Stephen Jones is air quoting, we're focused on that. He's giving an answer that's saying, yeah, we might look at doing some things differently, specifically in free agency. But that's the whole point, right? They were so sort of stubborn and aggressively anti last off season, right? Like they probably should have got a running back in the draft. When they didn't, they probably should have spent a little money to sign one instead of just bring back what was left of Ezekiel Elliott. That's an example of, again, somewhere in between the way they feel about free agency and the way the teams that go nuts in free agency every year, Jacksonville Jaguars or whoever, like somewhere in there, there's probably the right place to land, and they got to find that.
Meantime, it is Take It Back Tuesday. Every day this week, we're taking